Sarah Chen pressed her face against the passenger window as their car pulled up to 1247 Maple Street. The Victorian house loomed before them, its once grand facade now weathered by decades of neglect. Paint peeled from the wraparound porch like old wallpaper, and several shutters hung at awkward angles, giving the house a lopsided, almost comical expression. The front yard was a jungle of overgrown hedges and weeds that had claimed victory over what must have once been carefully manicured flower beds. "Are you sure about this?" Marcus asked, his hands still gripping the steering wheel despite having turned off the engine 5 minutes ago. His voice carried the same uncertainty he'd expressed when Sarah first showed him the listing online 3 weeks earlier. Sarah turned to her husband of 3 years, her dark eyes sparkling with the same enthusiasm that had convinced him to quit his corporate job and start their home renovation YouTube channel 6 months earlier. At 26, she had an uncanny ability to see potential where others saw only problems. "Look past what it is now," she said, stepping out of their beat-up Honda Civic. "See what it could become." Marcus followed reluctantly, his contractor's eye automatically cataloging the obvious problems. Rotted porch boards that sagged dangerously in places, missing roof shingles that left dark patches like missing teeth, foundation cracks that spider-webbed up the brick exterior, and gutters that hung at precarious angles, some completely detached from the roofline. At 28, he'd spent enough time in construction to know a money pit when he saw one. But Sarah's vision had never steered them wrong before. Not when she'd convinced him to renovate their first apartment, turning it from a cramped studio into a showcase that helped launch their YouTube channel, and not when she'd insisted they could make a living sharing their renovation adventures online. The real estate agent, Janet Holbrook, emerged from her silver Lexus with a smile that seemed apologetic. She was a seasoned professional who'd clearly shown this property to dozens of potential buyers, each one walking away after the initial tour. "I know it needs work," she began, adjusting her blazer against the October chill. "But the bones are solid, built in 1892 by William Ashford, one of the town's founding families. Original hardwood throughout, 10-foot ceilings. And look at that lot size, nearly an acre in the middle of town. Properties like this don't come on the market often." Sarah was already halfway up the front steps, testing each board carefully before putting her full weight on it. The porch stretched the full width of the house, supported by ornate Victorian columns that, despite their weathered appearance, seemed structurally sound. "The porch structure is solid," she called back to Marcus, running her hand along one of the columns. "Just needs new planking and some TLC. Look at this millwork. You can't find craftsmanship like this anymore." Inside, the house revealed its secrets slowly, like pages turning in an old book. Dust motes danced in shafts of sunlight that streamed through tall, narrow windows, many of which still contained their original wavy glass. The previous owners, an elderly couple named the Hendersons who'd lived there for 40 years, had left behind not just the house, but decades of accumulated life. Faded family photos still hanging crooked on wallpapered walls, furniture covered in white sheets like ghosts, and the lingering scent of lavender and old books that seemed to have soaked into the very walls. The entry foyer set the tone for the entire house, grand but neglected. A sweeping staircase dominated the space, its carved newel post and banister dulled by years, without proper care, but the intricate woodwork was still magnificent. The original chandelier, a brass fixture with crystal drops, hung dark and dusty, but intact. "Original crown molding?" Sarah whispered, running her fingers along the intricate woodwork in what had once been the formal dining room. The plaster walls showed water damage in several places, and the wallpaper, a faded floral pattern that had probably been fashionable in the 1970s, was peeling at the seams. And these floors, Marcus, look at these floors. Beneath years of grime and neglect, wide plank hardwood stretched throughout the main level. The grain was rich and deep, the kind of old-growth timber that couldn't be replicated today. Marcus knelt and scraped away some surface dirt with his thumbnail, revealing warm, honey-colored wood underneath that glowed even in the dim light filtering through dirty windows. "Okay," he admitted, his resistance beginning to crumble. "That's pretty beautiful. We're talking about a full refinishing job, and some of these boards will need to be replaced entirely." They spent 2 hours exploring every room, from the spacious kitchen with its vintage cast-iron stove and butler's pantry to the 4 bedrooms upstairs, each with its own unique character. The kitchen was perhaps the most challenging space. Original cabinets that had been painted over multiple times, countertops that were cracked and stained, and appliances that belonged in a museum. But it also had incredible bones, 10-foot ceilings, original hardwood floors, and windows on 3 sides that would flood the space with natural light once they were properly cleaned. The master bedroom featured a small balcony overlooking an overgrown garden where fruit trees still produced apples and pears despite years without pruning. Sarah opened the French doors and stepped onto the balcony, testing the railings carefully. The view was breathtaking. Mature trees provided privacy while still allowing glimpses of the town beyond. "Can you imagine having morning coffee out here?" she asked Marcus, who had joined her on the narrow balcony. The bathroom situations were, frankly, dire. The main bath featured pink tile from the 1950s, fixtures that were beyond salvage, and plumbing that would need complete replacement. But the room was large enough to accommodate a luxurious renovation with original tin ceiling tiles that could be restored and windows positioned to provide natural light without compromising privacy. Each bedroom told its own story. One had been a child's nursery, with faded alphabet stickers still clinging to the walls and a height chart penciled onto the doorframe. Another had served as a home office, with built-in bookshelves and a window seat that overlooked the side garden. The smallest bedroom, tucked under the eaves on the 3rd floor, had obviously been a teenager's retreat, complete with band posters and glow-in-the-dark stars still stuck to the slanted ceiling. "The asking price is $185,000, Janet explained as they concluded the tour in the living room, where an ornate fireplace dominated one wall. The mantelpiece was carved mahogany, blackened with age and neglect, but undeniably magnificent. "I'll be honest, it's been on the market for 8 months. Most buyers see the work involved and run the other way. The inspection reports alone are enough to scare people off, but for someone with vision and the skills to do the work." Sarah and Marcus exchanged glances. They had exactly $190,000 from the sale of their starter home in the suburbs, plus about $30,000 in savings they'd earmarked for renovations. It wasn't a fortune, but it might be enough if they were careful and did most of the work themselves. Marcus walked over to the fireplace and examined the brickwork inside the firebox. "When was this last used?" "The Hendersons said they stopped using it about 10 years ago when they got concerned about the chimney," Janet replied. "It would need to be inspected and probably relined before it could be used safely." "We'd like to make an offer," Sarah said before Marcus could voice any of his concerns. $170. Janet raised her eyebrows. "That's quite a bit below asking price." "It's also more than anyone else has offered in 8 months, Sarah replied diplomatically. 3 weeks later, after a nerve-wracking negotiation process and an inspection that revealed even more issues than they'd anticipated, they held the keys to 1247 Maple Street. The final purchase price was $175,000, leaving them with a small cushion for the inevitable surprises that came with old house renovation. The first month was brutal. Sarah had taken a leave of absence from her marketing job to focus on the renovation and their growing YouTube channel, Second Chance Spaces, which had gained a modest following of 15,000 subscribers interested in DIY home renovations. Marcus continued his part-time consulting work, but dedicated most of his energy to the house. They moved into the least damaged bedroom with air mattresses, a camping stove, and their laptops, documenting every step of their journey for their increasingly engaged online audience. Their first video from the house, "We Bought the Scariest House in Town," went viral in their niche community, garnering over 100,000 views in the first week. Comments ranged from supportive, "You two are living my dream," to skeptical, "I give them 6 months before they're broke and divorced." The attention was both encouraging and terrifying. They started with the essentials: electrical, plumbing, and HVAC. The electrical system was a nightmare, a mix of knob and tube wiring from the 1920s, aluminum wiring from the 1960s, and DIY additions that violated multiple. Marcus had connections in the trades from his construction days, and they managed to get the major systems updated for less than they'd budgeted, but it still cost $18,000. Money they hadn't planned to spend so early in the process. "The good news is the foundation is solid," Marcus announced one evening, emerging from the basement covered in cobwebs and grime. "The bad news is we need to replace about 60% of the floor joists. The previous owners had a plumbing leak that went undetected for years." Sarah looked up from her laptop, where she'd been editing their latest video about stripping wallpaper. The process had taken 3 days per room and had revealed surprising treasures. Original hand-painted borders in the dining room and gorgeous wood paneling in the study that had been covered for decades. "How much?" she asked, though she could tell from Marcus's expression that the news wasn't good. $8,000 if we do most of the labor ourselves, $12 if we hire it out. They did the math that night, spreadsheets glowing on Sarah's laptop screen in their makeshift bedroom. Even with Marcus doing much of the structural work himself, and even with their YouTube channel starting to generate modest revenue, they were looking at going significantly over budget. Their subscriber count had grown to 35,000, and they were earning about $800 a month from ad revenue and affiliate links. But it wasn't enough to cover the mounting expenses. "Maybe we could get a small loan," Sarah suggested, though her voice lacked conviction. Marcus shook his head. "We're already stretched thin. What if the channel doesn't take off? What if we can't finish the renovation? What if we end up having to sell at a loss?" For the first time since they'd started this adventure, doubt crept into Sarah's voice. "Are you saying we made a mistake?" Marcus looked around their current bedroom, the only livable space in the house. They'd managed to restore it first, refinished hardwood floors, fresh paint, and new windows that let in morning light and provided a view of the overgrown garden. It was beautiful, but it was also an island of completion in a sea of ongoing projects. "No," he said finally, pulling Sarah close. "I'm saying we need to get creative." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. While researching Victorian-era restoration techniques for a video, Sarah discovered that many of the house's original features, the carved newel post, decorative brackets, even the ornate fireplace mantel, were worth significantly more than they'd realized. More importantly, she found a community of restoration enthusiasts who were eager to help, share knowledge, and even provide materials. Their YouTube audience began to grow more rapidly as they shared not just the glamorous transformations, but the real struggles. The day they discovered a family of raccoons had been living in the attic, leaving behind damage that required professional remediation. The week they spent hand-stripping layers of lead paint from the intricate dining room wainscoting while wearing full protective gear in sweltering summer heat. The moment they broke down crying when they realized the kitchen renovation was going to cost twice what they'd planned, and they'd have to eat ramen noodles for 3 months to afford new appliances. "People connect with authentic stories," Sarah explained to Marcus as they reviewed their analytics one evening. Their subscriber count had jumped to 75,000 after a particularly vulnerable video about their financial struggles. "We're not just showing them a perfect transformation. We're showing them that it's possible to overcome challenges and create something beautiful, even when everything goes wrong." The comments on their videos became increasingly supportive and helpful. Viewers shared their own renovation experiences, offered practical advice, and even sent care packages when Sarah mentioned they were living on a tight budget. A retired craftsman in Oregon sent detailed instructions for repairing the original stained glass window in the front hall. A woman in Vermont who specialized in Victorian color schemes helped them choose historically accurate paint colors. Most surprisingly, a local woodworker named Jim Morrison offered to help restore the ornate staircase banister in exchange for featuring his craftsmanship in their videos. Jim turned out to be a godsend. In his 70s, he'd spent decades restoring period homes and had an encyclopedic knowledge of Victorian-era construction techniques. He became not just a collaborator, but a mentor, teaching Sarah and Marcus skills they never could have learned from YouTube tutorials. "This house was built by craftsmen who took pride in their work," Jim explained as he carefully examined the damaged banister. "Every piece of millwork was hand-carved. You can't just go, but if you're patient and willing to learn, you can restore it to its original glory." By month 6, the transformation was becoming visible from the street. The exterior had been painted in a rich sage green with cream trim that highlighted the house's architectural details. They'd spent weeks researching historically appropriate color schemes, eventually settling on a palette that was both authentic to the period and appealing to modern sensibilities. The front porch, completely rebuilt with new boards but maintaining its original design, welcomed visitors with restored columns and fresh gingerbread trim that Sarah had painstakingly scraped, primed, and painted by hand. The landscaping transformation happened gradually. Sarah discovered she had a natural talent for gardening, and she slowly brought the overgrown yard back to life. She spent hours researching plants that would have been common in Victorian gardens, eventually creating a design that blended historical accuracy with practical modern living. The fruit trees, properly pruned by a local arborist, produced abundant harvests of apples, pears, and plums that they shared with neighbors and featured in cooking videos. Inside, each room told its own story of careful restoration. The kitchen renovation took 3 months and tested every aspect of their relationship. They'd decided to blend modern functionality with vintage charm. The original cast-iron stove was professionally restored and now served as both a conversation piece and a fully functional cooking appliance. Modern energy-efficient appliances were carefully chosen to complement rather than compete with the vintage elements. The original farmhouse sink was stripped, re-enameled, and paired with reproduction fixtures that maintained the period feel while providing modern convenience. The most challenging aspect was the countertops. They dreamed of marble, but couldn't afford it. After weeks of research, they discovered a local quarry that specialized in reclaimed materials and found beautiful butcher block made from reclaimed barn wood that perfectly matched the kitchen's rustic elegance. The living room had become the showpiece, with the fireplace fully restored and serving as the focal point. The chimney had been relined, the firebox repaired, and the mantelpiece carefully restored to its original mahogany finish. They'd discovered original built-in bookcases hidden behind decades of renovations and brought them back to life, complete with their original hardware and glass front doors. The hardwood floors had been the most expensive single expense, $8,000 for professional refinishing throughout the main level, but the results were spectacular. The floors now gleamed under a combination of restored original fixtures and carefully chosen contemporary lighting that provided both ambiance and functionality. But it was the unexpected discoveries that made the project truly special and provided some of their most popular YouTube content. While renovating the master bedroom, they found a time capsule of sorts. Letters hidden behind a loose floorboard, written by the house's original inhabitants in the 1920s. The letters revealed a love story between William and Margaret Ashford during the early years of their marriage, describing their dreams for their new house and their hopes for the family they planned to raise there. Sarah shared excerpts from the letters in a video titled "Love Letters from 1924, and the response was overwhelming. The video garnered over 500,000 views and was picked up by several news outlets. Viewers connected deeply with the idea that houses hold memories and that renovation is about honoring the past while creating space for new stories. The publicity from the viral video brought new opportunities. Sponsors began reaching out, offering everything from free appliances to professional services in exchange for features in their videos. More importantly, they were invited to speak at home renovation conferences and were featured in several home improvement magazines. As their 1-year anniversary in the house approached, their YouTube channel had grown to over 250,000 subscribers, and they were earning enough from sponsorships and affiliate marketing to cover their living expenses. More importantly, they'd created something beautiful and sustainable. The house that had seemed like an overwhelming challenge had become a perfect blend of historical preservation and modern living. Every room told the story of their journey, from overwhelmed first-time renovators to confident restorers who'd found their calling. The final reveal came on a crisp October morning, exactly 1 year after they'd first walked through the front door. Sarah set up her camera in the same spot where she'd filmed their initial walkthrough, and they documented every room's transformation. The statistics were impressive. They'd stayed within their overall budget by doing most of the work themselves and finding creative solutions to expensive problems. They'd restored original features in every room while adding modern conveniences that didn't compromise the house's historical integrity. But the real success wasn't measured in square footage or subscriber counts. It was in the way morning light now streamed unobstructed through restored windows, illuminating rooms that had been dark for decades. It was in the sound of laughter echoing through spaces that had been silent too long. It was in the knowledge that they'd taken something broken and made it whole again. The thing about old houses, Sarah explained to the camera as she concluded their final renovation video, is that they're never really finished. They're living things that evolve with the people who love them. We didn't just restore this house, it restored something in us too. Marcus appeared beside her, no longer the reluctant partner, but a true believer in their mission. When we started this project, people told us we were crazy to take on such a big challenge. But the best things in life usually require a little bit of crazy. Their story had become bigger than just a house renovation. They'd inspired thousands of people to take on their own projects, to see potential where others saw problems, to believe that with enough determination and creativity, any challenge could be overcome. The Victorian at 1247 Maple Street was no longer a neglected relic, but a masterpiece of restoration, a testament to the power of vision and persistence, and most importantly, it was home. The couple who had taken a leap of faith on a neglected old house had not only transformed it perfectly, they'd been perfectly transformed by it in return.